In the glittering ballroom of the Crescent Tower in San Francisco, Billionaire CEO Richard Langford struck his pregnant wife across the face and no one moved. The music kept playing. The laughter froze. Every eye turned away, except one. At the far corner, Ethan Cole, a single dad janitor working the night shift, stepped forward, trembling but steady. "Sir, please stop. She's pregnant." That sentence shattered the silence and changed his life forever. This isn't just a story about power or wealth. It's about courage, about the moment one ordinary man chose to stand up when everyone else stayed silent. The Crescent Tower's 48th floor glittered like a constellation brought down to earth. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across marble floors, so polished they reflected the faces of San Francisco's elite like mirrors of conscience, mirrors most had learned to ignore. Richard Langford stood at the center of it all, a king in his glass castle. At 42, he'd built Helios Systems from a garage startup into a tech empire worth $8 billion. The Wall Street Journal called him the architect of tomorrow's infrastructure. Forbes named him Entrepreneur of the Year. Tonight, 300 guests had paid $50,000 each to attend his charity gala, benefiting children's hospitals, the irony of which would become apparent soon enough. Grace Langford moved through the crowd with practiced elegance, her emerald gown carefully tailored to accommodate her 6-month pregnancy. At 34, she'd been a promising architect before becoming Mrs. Langford. Now, she designed nothing but excuses. "Your husband is remarkable," a silver-haired board member told her, champagne glass raised, truly visionary. Grace smiled the way she'd learned to smile with her mouth but not her eyes. "He is indeed." She caught Richard's gaze across the room. He was laughing with Senator Patricia Winters, his hand gesturing expansively, commanding attention the way he commanded everything. Then his eyes found hers, and the laughter died. She'd made a mistake. She'd moved to the wrong side of the room. He'd told her to stay near the entrance, to greet the Mitchell family when they arrived. Grace's hand instinctively moved to her stomach, a protective gesture she'd developed over the past 3 years. The baby kicked, as if sensing her tension. The string quartet transitioned into Vivaldi. Waiters in crisp white jackets circulated with trays of hors d'oeuvres that cost more than most people's weekly groceries. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, San Francisco sprawled below like a circuit board, lights connecting in patterns that Richard claimed to control. "Grace." His voice came from behind her, low and tight. A word. She turned, smile still fixed in place. "Of course, darling." He guided her toward the edge of the room, with a hand on her elbow gentle to any observer, but his fingers dug into her arm like talons. They stopped near a marble column, decorated with white orchids. "The Mitchells," he said quietly, his face still arranged in a pleasant expression for the crowd. "Where are the Mitchells?" "They sent their regrets, Richard." "Mrs. Mitchell's mother had a blank. I told you to confirm with them this morning." "I did. She called an hour ago." "It was an emergency. Everything is always an emergency with you." His breath smelled like bourbon, which meant he was on his 4th drink. Maybe his 5th. "Do you understand what the Mitchell contract means? Do you comprehend anything beyond picking out dresses and spending my money?" Grace kept her voice level, kept smiling. People were watching. People were always watching. "I confirmed twice." She apologized profusely. "I have the message. You have excuses." He picked up a wine glass from a passing tray, drained half of it in one gulp. 3 years, Grace. 3 years of incompetence. The only thing you've managed to do right is get pregnant, and you can't even do that without complaining about every little discomfort. The baby kicked again, harder this time. Grace wondered if somehow, even in the womb, her daughter could sense the danger. "Richard, please. Not here." "Not here?" He laughed. But it was the laugh she'd learned to fear sharp-edged and brittle. "Where then?" "At home. Where you've turned my son against me with your tears. In the car, where the driver can hear you whimpering." He moved closer, and she stepped back instinctively. forgetting the marble pillar behind her. Her back hit the column. "Trapped. You're drunk," she whispered. "Please, let's just—" The glass slipped from his hand, or perhaps he threw it. She could never be sure later. It shattered against the pillar beside her head, spraying wine across her emerald dress like blood. The crystal shards scattered across the floor, their tinkling sound impossibly loud in the sudden silence. The quartet stopped playing. Conversations died mid-sentence. 300 faces turned as one. And Richard Langford, architect of tomorrow's infrastructure, humanitarian, visionary, raised his hand and struck his pregnant wife across the face. The crack echoed in the silence like a gunshot. Grace's head snapped to the side. Pain exploded across her cheekbone. She tasted copper she'd bitten her tongue. Her hand went to her face, came away with a smear of red lipstick and blood. For a moment, the entire room held its breath. Someone coughed. A woman near the bar studied her champagne as if it contained the secrets of the universe. Senator Winters suddenly needed to check her phone. The board member who'd praised Richard's vision discovered an urgent need to visit the restroom. 300 witnesses. 300 people who looked away. The quartet resumed playing, softer now, as if trying to cover the sound of shattering glass, shattering illusions, shattering silence. And in the corner, in the shadow of a service door, a man in a janitor's uniform stopped pushing his cleaning cart and watched with mounting horror as the glittering world revealed its true face. Ethan Cole had perfected the art of invisibility. After 5 years working night shifts at Crescent Tower, he'd learned that the key to survival in spaces designed for the powerful was to become part of the background, as unremarkable as the marble floors he polished, or the glass he wiped clean of fingerprints. At 33, Ethan carried himself with the careful posture of someone used to making himself small. He was tall enough, just over 6 feet, but he'd mastered the ability to seem shorter, to fold into corners, to move through rooms without causing ripples. His uniform was always immaculate. His cart organized with the precision of someone who'd learned that chaos in small things could spiral into chaos in everything. His shift started at 8 p.m., 2 hours before the gala guests began arriving. While they ascended in golden elevators to the 48th floor, Ethan took the service lift to the basement to clock in. His dinner of convenience store, sandwich and apple eaten during the bus ride from his apartment in the Tenderloin. Evening, Cole, his supervisor, Marcus Henderson, grunted without looking up from his clipboard. 48th floor tonight. Gala event. Big money up there, so stay invisible. Clean the service areas, kitchen backup, restrooms. Don't interact with guests unless directly addressed. And if you are, you smile, nod, and disappear. Understood? Understood, Ethan replied, a script he could recite in his sleep. Helios Systems is the building's biggest tenant. Richard Langford himself. One complaint, and you're gone. We clear? Crystal clear. Marcus finally looked at him, eyes narrowed. You got a kid, right? Single dad? Yes, sir. Daughter. 7 years old. Then don't screw this up. Good help is hard to find. But desperate people are everywhere. Marcus handed him a key card for the service areas. Get moving. Ethan took the service elevator up, alone with his thoughts and the soft hum of machinery. The metal walls were scratched and dented, marked by years of carts and equipment and invisible people moving invisible loads. It was a different world than the one that existed beyond the service doors. No marble, no crystal, no illusions. He thought about Lily, as he always did during these quiet moments. She'd be asleep by now at Mrs. Carmen's apartment, the elderly neighbor who watched her during his night shifts. This morning, before school, they'd made pancakes together. Lily had insisted on flipping them herself, resulting in one on the ceiling, and both of them laughing so hard they could barely breathe. Papa, when I grow up, I'm going to be a chef, she'd declared, syrup on her chin. You can be anything you want, baby girl, he'd told her, meaning every word. The elevator dinged at 48. The service door opened to a narrow hallway, the sounds of the gala muffled through walls, designed to separate worlds. Ethan pushed his cart forward, following the path he'd walked hundreds of times, past the kitchen entrance where he could smell roasted duck and truffle oil, past the restrooms where he'd meticulously clean and restock after midnight, past the storage rooms filled with linens and crystal and all the props required to maintain illusions. Through a gap in the service door, he glimpsed the gala in full swing. It was like watching a movie, beautiful people in beautiful clothes, laughing beautiful laughs, living beautiful lies. He'd learned not to feel bitter about it. These people existed in a different universe, one where the laws of gravity and consequence bent differently. He moved to the service corridor that ran behind the main ballroom, separated only by decorative columns and strategic plants. From here, he could work unseen while maintaining his assigned areas. He began with the restrooms, methodical and thorough, the way he approached everything. The men's room was predictable, some splashing at the sinks, paper towels on the floor, the smell of expensive cologne. The women's room required more care. He knocked 3 times, announced maintenance, waited the required 30 seconds, then entered. Empty. He worked quickly, efficiently, restocking, wiping, checking. He was returning to his cart when he heard the voices rise in the ballroom. At first, he thought nothing of it. Galas were loud music, laughter, clinking glasses, the hum of people performing wealth. But something in the tone caught his attention. A shift in the atmosphere, like air pressure dropping before a storm. He shouldn't look. Looking was breaking the first rule of invisibility. But something pulled him toward the gap in the service door. Some instinct honed by fatherhood. The same instinct that woke him when Lily had nightmares before she even called out. Through the gap, he saw them, the couple near the marble column. The woman in the emerald dress, pregnant and beautiful and terrified. The man, clearly drunk, clearly angry, clearly unconcerned, that 300 people could see him. Ethan's hand gripped his cart handle as the wine glass shattered. He watched the woman's face, saw the fear he recognized from somewhere deep and painful in his own past. His wife, Sarah, had been pregnant with Lily when the drunk driver crossed the center line. The impact had shattered her pelvis, broken 3 ribs, caused internal bleeding that required emergency surgery. She'd survived. Lily had survived. But something in Sarah had broken beyond repair, not her body, but her spirit. She'd left 6 months after Lily was born, disappeared into a life Ethan couldn't follow or fix. He'd learned then that some wounds weren't visible, that violence came in forms beyond fists, that watching someone you love suffer while being powerless was its own kind of death. And now, through a gap in a service door, he watched another pregnant woman about to be hurt. And the entire glittering room looked away. The man's hand rose. The crack of the slap echoed like a breaking world. And Ethan Cole, who'd perfected invisibility, who'd learned to survive by staying silent, who had a 7-year-old daughter, depending on his paycheck, made a choice that would shatter his carefully constructed safety. He stepped through the service door into the light. Later, when reporters asked him about that moment, Ethan would struggle to explain it. It wasn't heroism. Heroes didn't tremble like leaves in a storm. It wasn't righteousness. Righteous people probably didn't feel like vomiting from fear. It was something simpler and more complicated. It was the inability to look away when looking away was all that was required to survive. His shoes, cheap, non-slip, practical, made soft sounds against the marble as he crossed the ballroom floor. Each step felt like walking through water, resistance building with every inch. The crowd parted without quite acknowledging him. A ripple of discomfort spreading through the space. Richard Langford was breathing hard, his hands still raised. His eyes locked on his wife with a mixture of rage and something worse, satisfaction. Grace remained pressed against the pillar, one hand on her reddened cheek, the other protectively cradling her pregnant belly. "Sir." Ethan's voice came out rough, barely above a whisper. He cleared his throat, tried again. "Sir, please." "Stop." Richard turned slowly, his face transforming from rage to confusion to contempt in the space of a heartbeat. "Excuse me?" Up close, Richard Langford was shorter than he appeared in photographs. though he carried himself with the posture of someone used to looking down on others regardless of physical height. His tuxedo probably cost more than Ethan's annual salary. His watch platinum and diamond. Ethan noted with the odd clarity that comes with fear could have paid Lily's college tuition. "She's pregnant," Ethan said, and hated how his voice shook. "Please, just stop." The ballroom had gone silent again. The quartet held their bows suspended over strings. Waiters froze, with trays balanced on their shoulders. 300 people watched a janitor in a polyester uniform challenge a billionaire, and no one knew what script to follow. Richard's eyes narrowed. "Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" "Yes, sir." Ethan glanced at Grace, whose eyes were wide with something between hope and terror. "I just can't watch someone hurt her. She's pregnant." "Please, can't watch?" Richard laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Then perhaps you should return to whatever corner you crawled out of and continue not watching. That's what you're paid for, isn't it? To clean up messes while remaining invisible?" Heat flushed through Ethan's face, but he held his ground. "I'm asking you, respectfully, to please stop. That's all. Just stop. Respectfully." Richard rolled the word around like a marble in his mouth, testing its weight. "How fascinating. A janitor giving me advice on behavior at my own event." He turned to the crowd, arms spread wide. "Does anyone else find this amusing? The help has opinions about how I treat my wife." A few nervous laughs rippled through the room. Senator Winters examined her nails. The board members found their phones suddenly fascinating. Richard stepped closer to Ethan, close enough that Ethan could smell the bourbon on his breath, see the burst blood vessels in his eyes, feel the rage radiating off him like heat from asphalt. "Let me explain something to you, janitor. You exist in my world at my pleasure. This building? I own 40% of it. Your job? I could end it with a phone call. Your pathetic little life? It matters exactly as much as I decide it matters, which is to say, not at all." Ethan's hands clenched at his sides. Every survival instinct screamed at him to back down, to apologize, to fold back into invisibility where he belonged. He thought of Lily, of Mrs. Carmen's kindly face telling him she couldn't watch her tomorrow because she had a doctor's appointment, of the stack of bills on his kitchen counter, of the fact that his car needed new brakes, and he'd been putting it off for 3 months. He thought of Sarah, broken and gone. Of the drunk driver who'd served 6 months and was now living free while Ethan raised their daughter alone. Of all the times he'd been powerless to stop pain, to prevent loss, to make things right. "I know all that, sir," Ethan said quietly. "I know you can destroy me. I know I'm nobody to you. But she's your wife. She's pregnant with your child. And what you're doing is wrong." Richard's hand moved so fast Ethan barely registered it. The slap caught him across the mouth, snapping his head to the side. Pain exploded across his jaw. He tasted blood, felt his lip split. "You think anyone will believe a janitor like you?" Richard hissed, his face inches from Ethan's. "You think your word means anything against mine? I could tell them you attacked me, that you were drunk on duty, that you threatened my wife, and by morning you'd be in jail, and I'd be the hero who subdued you." Ethan straightened slowly, his hand wiping blood from his mouth. His whole body shook, adrenaline and fear, and something else. Something that felt almost like clarity flooding through him. "You're probably right," Ethan said. "You're probably right about all of it. You can fire me. You can ruin me. You can make sure I never work in this city again." He met Richard's eyes directly, something he'd never done with any of the building's wealthy tenants. "But at least I'll still be able to look my daughter in the eye. At least you'll know her father stood up for what was right, even when it cost him everything. Can you say the same?" The silence that followed was different from before, thicker, heavier, charged with something electric. Someone near the back of the room moved, and Ethan heard the distinctive sound of a smartphone camera shutter. Richard heard it too. His head snapped around, searching for the source. "Who's recording? Stop that immediately. I'll sue anyone who—" Too late, a woman's voice called from somewhere in the crowd. "It's already uploading." Another voice. "I got it too." Another. "Same here." Richard's face transformed, rage giving way to something approaching panic. He was a man who'd built an empire on controlling narratives, on managing perceptions, on ensuring that reality bent to his will. The idea that his image might escape his control clearly terrified him in a way physical confrontation never could. He turned back to Ethan, and for a moment, genuine hatred burned in his eyes. "You have no idea what you've just done to yourself." "Maybe not," Ethan admitted, "but I know what I didn't do. I didn't look away." Security guards materialized from the edges of the room, two large men in dark suits who'd been invisible until needed, just like Ethan himself. One took his arm, with practiced firmness. "Mr. Langford wants you removed from the premises," the guard said quietly. "Please come with us without making a scene." Ethan nodded, offering no resistance. As they led him toward the service door, he caught Grace's eyes one final time. Tears streamed down her face, smudging her perfect makeup, and her lips moved silently. "Thank you." The service door closed behind him, sealing him back into his world, away from the crystal and marble and illusions. The two guards escorted him to the service elevator in silence. "That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen," one of them finally said as the elevator descended. His name tag read, Torres. "My money's on stupid." "Probably right," Ethan agreed. His jaw throbbed. His hands still shook. His whole world was falling apart. And all he could think about was how he'd tell Lily that he'd lost his job, how he'd pay rent, how he'd keep them afloat. But underneath the fear, something else flickered small and fragile, as a candle flame, but burning nonetheless. He'd spoken. The world hadn't ended. Not yet. Anyway, Daniel Rivera had worked as head chef at Crescent Tower's executive dining room for 12 years. He'd started as a line cook fresh from culinary school in Los Angeles, worked his way up through sheer persistence and the kind of talent that made food critics use words like transcendent and inspired. At 41, he ran a kitchen that served the building's elite with military precision and artistic flair. He'd also learned, through years of watching powerful people at their worst, when to keep his mouth shut. The kitchen occupied the north corner of the 48th floor, connected to the ballroom through a service corridor. During the gala, Daniel's team had been operating at peak capacity, preparing and plating 200 servings of seared duck breast with black cherry reduction, another 100 of line-caught halibut with truffle butter, not to mention the dessert course that had taken 2 days to execute properly. He'd seen the whole thing. The kitchen had 3 small windows that looked out onto the ballroom, ostensibly for timing and coordination, but really so the staff could see when guests needed attention. Daniel had been checking the progress of the main course service when he'd witnessed Richard Langford strike his wife. He'd frozen, spatula in hand, watching the scene unfold with the detached horror of someone observing a car crash. His sous chef, Kevin Martinez, had muttered Jesus Christ under his breath. 2 of the line cooks had gone silent, staring through the window. And then the janitor Daniel had seen him around. Quiet guy, always polite. Once helped him carry a broken ice machine to the service elevator, had walked out of the shadows and into the light. Daniel watched the confrontation through the kitchen window, his heart hammering against his ribs. Every word was muffled by the thick glass. But the body language told the story clearly enough. The janitor standing up, Langford's rage, the slap that made Daniel's own jaw ache in sympathy, the smartphones coming out. "Boss," Kevin said quietly. "Should we?" "No," Daniel cut him off. "We keep working. We stay out of it." But he didn't look away. Couldn't look away. He watched security escort the janitor out, watched Langford smooth his jacket, say something to his wife that made her flinch, watched the crowd slowly, uncertainly, resume their evening as if they could simply pretend the interruption had never happened. The music started again. Guests laughed, though the laughter sounded forced. Waiters resumed circulation. The machine of wealth and power ground forward, efficiently processing the inconvenient truth into something manageable, digestible. Forgettable. Service for table 7, someone called, and Daniel mechanically plated the duck, his hands moving through familiar motions while his mind churned. He thought about Maria, his wife of 15 years, currently undergoing her 3rd round of chemotherapy for ovarian cancer. He thought about his 3 kids, Carlos, 13, Sofia, 11, and little Miguel, 7, who needed him employed and stable and present. He thought about the mortgage on their small house in Daly City, the medical bills that kept piling up despite insurance, the fact that this job paid $60,000 more than he'd make anywhere else. He thought about the janitor's face as security led him away, not defeated, exactly, but resigned to consequences he'd known were coming. "Chef, table 13 is asking for you," one of the servers said, pulling him back to the present. "They want to compliment the halibut." Daniel wiped his hands on his apron and headed toward the ballroom floor, the mask of professional hospitality sliding into place. Table 13 turned out to be a group of venture capitalists who probably couldn't tell good halibut from fish sticks, but enjoyed having the chef fawn over them. He smiled, nodded, accepted their compliments, and returned to the kitchen. "Chef," Kevin said as soon as he was back, "Langford's asking for you." Daniel's stomach dropped. "What?" "He wants to speak with you. Personally. In his office." Right now, through the window, Daniel could see Richard Langford had left the ballroom. Grace was nowhere visible. The party continued without them, the guests having collectively decided that moving on was the same as being innocent. Daniel pulled off his apron slowly, buying time to think. He knew what this was about. Langford wanted to ensure his silence, to make clear what the consequences would be for anyone who decided to follow the janitor's example. The walk to Langford's office, a massive corner space on the 47th floor, felt like walking to an execution. Daniel's hands were steady, but only through force of will. He knocked on the door, marked Richard Langford, CEO, Helios Systems. "Come in." The office was designed to intimidate floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the San Francisco Bay. Minimalist furniture that probably cost more than Daniel's car, walls covered with awards and photographs of Richard shaking hands with presidents and prime ministers. Richard sat behind a desk of polished black marble, a glass of bourbon in his hand. His bow tie was loosened, his eyes red-rimmed but sharp. "Mr. Rivera," he said, gesturing to a chair. "Sit." Daniel sat, keeping his back straight, his face neutral. "You've been with us for 12 years, Richard continued. "Exemplary service. The building management loves you. The tenants love you. Hell, I love your duck." He took a sip of bourbon. "I'd hate to lose you. Here it comes," Daniel thought. "Tonight was unfortunate," Richard said, his voice carefully modulated. "An embarrassing misunderstanding, fueled by alcohol and stress. My wife has been difficult lately, hormones. You know how pregnancy is. And that janitor completely misread a private moment between spouses." Daniel said nothing, just nodded slightly. "I'm sure you saw some of the incident from the kitchen," Richard continued. "I'm also sure you, as a professional, understand that what happens in someone's marriage is their business. Not the business of staff, not the business of the media, not the business of anyone." "Yes, sir," Daniel heard himself say. "Good." Richard smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I knew you were smart. You have a family, don't you? Wife with cancer, I heard. 3 children?" The threat was implicit, but clear as crystal. "Yes, sir, that's correct. Medical bills must be substantial. Good thing you have excellent insurance through this position. Would be a shame to lose that." Richard leaned forward. "I need to know I can count on you, Daniel. I need to know that if anyone asks reporters, lawyers, whoever you saw, nothing unusual tonight. Just a private conversation between a husband and wife that the janitor misunderstood. Can I count on you?" Every instinct Daniel had honed over 41 years of survival screamed at him to agree, to nod, to thank Richard for his understanding, and return to his kitchen and his duck and his carefully maintained life. He thought about Maria in the hospital bed this morning. her hand thin and cold in his, whispering, "I'm proud of you, mi amor. You're a good man." He thought about Carlos, who'd recently started getting into fights at school, who'd said last week, "Nobody stands up for anything anymore, Dad. Everyone just looks away." He thought about the janitor's face, bloodied but unbowed, speaking truth to power with everything to lose. "Sir," Daniel said slowly, "I can't do that." Richard's expression hardened. "Excuse me? I saw what happened. I saw you hit your pregnant wife." Daniel's voice was steadier than he felt. "I can't pretend I didn't. I can't lie about it. Not even to keep my job." "You're making a mistake," Richard said quietly, dangerously. "A catastrophic mistake. You understand that?" "Yes, sir, I understand. You'll never work in another high-end kitchen in this city. I'll make sure of it. I'll make sure your name is poison in every restaurant, every hotel, every club, from here to Los Angeles." "I believe you," Daniel said. He stood up, legs trembling but holding. "But I have to be able to look at my children and tell them that their father stood for what was right. I have to be able to look at my wife and know I was the man she thought she married." He walked to the door, half expecting security to stop him, to drag him back, to make him disappear in ways that people with power could make inconvenient witnesses disappear. The door opened. The hallway was empty. He walked through. Behind him, he heard Richard's voice, low and venomous. "You just destroyed your family's future for a janitor you don't even know. I hope he's worth it." Daniel paused, looked back. "It's not about him, sir. It's about being able to sleep at night." He returned to the kitchen, where his team was plating the final dessert course, dark chocolate soufflé with raspberry coulis. They looked at him with questions in their eyes. But he said nothing. There was nothing to say yet. He removed his chef's jacket, folded it carefully, and set it on his station. 12 years of work, folded into a white square. "Kevin," he said to his sous chef, "you're in charge. Finish service. Do it perfect." "Boss, what?" "I just quit," Daniel said simply. "Or got fired. Not sure which. Doesn't matter." He walked out through the service entrance, took the employee elevator down to the ground floor, and stepped out into the San Francisco night. The air was cold and damp, smelling of fog and salt water. His phone buzzed. A text from Maria. "How's work, mi amor?" Daniel typed back, "Eventful. Tell you when I get home. Love you." He started walking toward the bus stop, his chef's pants and white shirt marking him as someone displaced from his proper context. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Didn't know how he'd pay the bills, keep the insurance, feed his family. But for the first time in years, Daniel Rivera felt like he could breathe. Ethan Cole sat on the bench outside Crescent Tower at 3 in the morning, his jaw throbbing, his hands still shaking from adrenaline that had nowhere to go. The streets were empty, except for the occasional taxi and the dedicated homeless population that called this part of downtown their territory. Security had escorted him out 2 hours ago, but he'd stayed, unable to quite process what had happened, unable to face going home and explaining to Mrs. Carmen and eventually to Lily why he no longer had a job. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, his supervisor. "Suspended pending investigation. Don't come to work until you hear from HR. Probably best you start looking for new employment." Not fired yet, but the writing was clear on the wall. Another buzz. His bank app, cheerfully reminding him that rent was due in 5 days, $1,850, that he didn't have without next week's paycheck. His lip had stopped bleeding. But when he probed it with his tongue, he could feel the swelling. He'd have a bruise by morning. Good. At least there would be evidence of what happened, even if no one cared. "Hey," Ethan looked up. A man stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, wearing chef's pants and a white shirt. It took Ethan a moment to recognize him, the head chef from the kitchen, the one whose food he'd sometimes smelled during his shifts, making his stomach growl and reminding him that frozen dinners were a poor substitute for real cooking. "You're the janitor," the man said. "Not a question. Was the janitor," Ethan corrected. "Ethan Cole, Daniel Rivera." He gestured to the bench. "Mind if I sit? Free country." Daniel sat, leaving a respectful distance between them. They sat in silence for a moment. Two men displaced from their proper contexts, adrift in the space between midnight and morning. "I saw what you did," Daniel finally said. "In the ballroom," Ethan nodded slowly. "Yeah. Guess a lot of people saw. Guess it didn't matter." "It mattered," Daniel said quietly. "It mattered to me." Another silence. A street cleaner rumbled past, its brushes scraping against asphalt. "I told him no," Daniel continued. "Langford. He called me to his office, tried to make me say I hadn't seen anything, offered me my job if I stayed quiet, threatened to destroy me if I didn't." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I told him to go to hell. Professionally." But the message was clear. Ethan looked at him properly for the first time. "You quit your job?" "He probably fired me while I was walking down here." Tomato. Tomato. Daniel shrugged. "I got 3 kids, a wife with cancer, a mortgage. What you did was either bravery or insanity." "What I did was definitely insanity." "Why?" Ethan asked. "Why throw everything away for? For what?" "For the truth. For being able to look my kids in the eye." Daniel met his gaze. "Same reason you did it, I'm guessing." Ethan felt something loosen in his chest, a knot he hadn't realized was there. "I thought I was alone in this." "You're not alone," Daniel said firmly. "Not anymore." They sat in silence again, but it was different now, companionable rather than isolating. "I recorded it," Daniel said after a while. "The kitchen has security cameras. They feed to a local server that I have access to as head chef. Food safety regulations. Need to prove proper handling if there's ever a contamination issue." I made a copy before I left. Everything that happened in the ballroom, the glass breaking, the hit, your intervention, the second hit, all of it. Ethan's heart rate picked up. "Why would you?" "Because I've watched powerful people get away with terrible things for 12 years, Daniel said. "I've seen harassment, discrimination, abuse, all kinds of darkness hiding behind expensive suits and charity galas. And I've stayed quiet because I told myself I had to. Because I had responsibilities. Because speaking up would destroy my life." He pulled out his phone, pulled up a video file. "But you didn't stay quiet, even though you had just as much to lose, maybe more." He held out the phone. Ethan could see the paused image, the ballroom, captured from a high angle, showing everything. "What do we do with it?" Ethan asked. "I don't know," Daniel admitted. "But we've got proof. We've got evidence that what happened wasn't just a misunderstanding, or a private moment, or any of the other lies they're going to try to tell. We've got the truth." Ethan's phone buzzed again. This time, it was an email. No, multiple emails, all with the same subject line. "Incident at Crescent Tower." He opened one. It was from someone named Maya Chen, identifying herself as an independent journalist. "I was at the gala tonight. I saw what you did. I believe your story, and I want to help tell it. Please contact me." Another email. Similar content, different sender. Another. "Jesus," Ethan muttered. "How did they find my email?" "Probably building directory," Daniel said, checking his own phone. "I'm getting them too. Vultures, smelling blood." Or maybe, a woman's voice said from behind them, allies looking to help. They both turned. A woman in her 30s stood there, wearing jeans and a jacket, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked tired but alert, and something about her presence suggested someone used to being in difficult places asking difficult questions. "Maya Chen," she introduced herself. "Independent journalist, formerly with the Chronicle until I got fired for refusing to kill a story about a certain tech CEO's employment practices. She looked between them. I'm guessing you're Ethan Cole and Daniel Rivera? How did you? Ethan started. I talked to one of the security guards. Torres. He's a good guy, doesn't like what happened tonight. She pulled out a notebook, old school paper rather than digital. I want to tell your story. The real story, not the version that Langford's PR team is already spinning to the press. We don't have a story, Ethan said. We have unemployment and bad judgment. You have courage, Maya corrected. And you're not the only ones who saw what happened tonight. But you're the only ones who stood up. That matters. Daniel glanced at Ethan, something unspoken passing between them. What do you want from us? An interview. On the record. Everything you saw. Everything that happened. And if you have any evidence, video, photos, anything, I need that too. Why should we trust you? Ethan asked. You could be working for him. I could be, Maya agreed. But I'm not. And honestly, you don't have a lot of options. Langford has already started the smear campaign. By tomorrow morning, you'll be the drunk janitor who attacked him. And you'll be the disgruntled chef who got fired for contaminating food. She looked at them steadily. I can help you tell the truth before his lies become the official version. But we need to move fast. Ethan looked at Daniel. Daniel looked back. Some wordless communication happened, the kind that occurs between people who've suddenly found themselves in the same trench facing the same enemy. I've got video, Daniel said. Kitchen security footage. And I've got nothing to lose, Ethan added. My life was already barely holding together. Might as well go down fighting. Maya smiled. But it was fierce rather than friendly. Then, let's get to work. They moved to a 24-hour diner 3 blocks away, sliding into a booth while the exhausted waitress brought them coffee without being asked. Maya set up a small recording device on the table, checked the levels, and pulled out her notebook. Start from the beginning, she said. Everything. Don't leave anything out. As dawn broke over San Francisco, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, 3 people who'd been invisible sat in a fluorescent-lit diner and began to speak the truth out loud. Outside, the city was waking up. Soon, the world would be too.